you know, that said, his son Rand actually takes an opposite position. So, you know, maybe those two could argue about that. But so I think those are the main criticisms against him. And rather than me speak to some of them, there's a little YouTube clip that will show, which is just him responding to a question in the Fox News debate in the 2008 primary. This was in South Carolina. So we want to play that.
Another question about electability. Do you have any, sir? There is always the question as to whether or not you are in fact viable. Your differences with the Republicans with the rest of the Republicans on this stage has raised questions about whether or not you can actually win the general Republican nomination, sir.
Well, we've only had 2 little primaries so far, so it's pretty premature to decide which one is going to be the candidate. But you know, when you think about it, if you measured everything I've ever said, every vote I've ever taken against the Constitution, you know, I'm a strict constitutionalist. Are you suggesting the Republicans should write me off because I'm a strict constitutionalist? I'm the most conservative member here. I have voted, you know, against more spending and wasting government than anybody else. So you're suggesting that I'm not electable and the Republicans don't want me because I'm a strict fiscal conservative, because I believe in civil liberties? Why should we not be defending civil liberties? And why should we not be talking about foreign policy that used to be the part of the Republican Party? Mr. Republican Robert Taft didn't even want us to be in NATO. And you're saying now that we have to continue to borrow money from China to finance this empire that we can't afford? Let me see if I get this right. We need to borrow $10 billion from China, and then we give it to Musharraf, who's a military dictator who overthrew an elected government, and then we go to war, we lose all these lives promoting democracy in Iran. I mean, what's going on here? This is a Republican message. I defend the platform. It used to say we got rid of the Department of Education. It doesn't say that now. We as Republicans went and doubled the size of the Department of Education. So where are we going? I think we've lost our way. But then the insinuation that I am less Republican because of that?
Congressman, thank you very much.
All right. Other than that, I guess you got perhaps some time for Q&A. I don't know.
Does anybody have any questions, or we're going to move to Mr. Santorum? Then I want to hear what we want to hear what you folks think about both of them and the field in general. Do you want to go right to Rick Santorum, or do you want to ask any questions about Congressman Paul? Sir. Gentleman in the back.
Am I correct that Congressman Paul is the only announced or potential candidate for president, not only in the Republican Party but anywhere else, who has had actual military service?
I do not know the answer to that question, but the way you pose it makes me think the answer may be yes.
We can try to find that out.
Yeah.
We make a note. We'll
You
try to
looked
get that
awfully
answer.
handsome in that uniform, though, certainly.
Okay. Sir.
I will actually make a comment because my son is a student at Ohio State, and he invited me to come down there to hear Ron Paul and Judge Napolitano speak. And it was at the Agora. They had a line that was all the way from the Agora to Lane, which was over a mile long of kids. Everybody there was a college student except for less than 1%. When he walked in the room, you would swear that Michael Jackson had arrived. The place went completely ballistic, and my friend told me, who I was with my age, that this looks like the 60s all over again. And lo and behold, when the judge spoke, he says, "It's us against the man." And the place went completely gonzo, and all they chanted after that was "End the Fed," because they knew they were going to be paying the bill. But what that gets to is the fact that the youth, typically from my era, was very Democratic-oriented, and this time around, the youth have a whole different approach because they understand the need for the Constitution. And if any of us that was in college, when my son called me at 18 years old to ask me, what is the Federal Reserve? I almost fell out of my chair because all I cared about was where to get beer and girls. for them to say that and have that level of interest, the future for America is bright.
We are in the midst of a revolution.
Very much so.
Yeah, just a real quick follow-up to this gentleman's comment. I spent a lot of time at the Ohio State campus as well during the last election, trying to talk to the kids about why they wanted to vote for Obama. I will tell you that before Ron Paul basically dropped out of the race, he had their vote in a big, big way. And when he dropped out, it all swapped over to Obama. So they saw something there. Well, at a point, he wasn't considered.
When McCain won the nomination.
Yeah.
Right.
One more, then we'll move on to Mr. Santorum.
Just in regards to the ending foreign aid, so he doesn't want the federal government to take our money from us to give to the rest of the world, but he doesn't have a problem if somebody wants to donate on their own.
Right, and I think what's also interesting is lots of people have really knocked him because they're saying, oh, you don't want to give money to Israel, you want to be non-interventionist. And then Obama comes and says, I want to redraw the lines of Israel and Palestine back to 1967. And Ron Paul says, no way should the United States be dictating to Israel where their borders should or should not be. But that means that we need to hands off completely. And I think people are really in favor of intervening when it suits their political interests. And it's about having that intellectual consistency that I think is very attractive to young people.
Can you just ask one thing? Because I thought it was great.
Oh, thank you.
But what would his position be like, for example, if one of our allies were attacked or something, like Israel or...
Very good question. Repeat the question, ma'am.
The question being, what would Ron Paul's position be if one of our allies were attacked? Specifically Israel. I think he would say that he takes the advice of Thomas Jefferson, where he says, "Peace and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none." So
What does that mean?
that means that we don't engage in alliances. We don't promise to go into war just because another nation is attacked. Now that being said, from a pragmatic point of view, I would note that Israel has a very large arsenal of nuclear weapons, and in the event they were to be attacked, I think Iran and much of the rest of the Middle East would be absolutely obliterated.
I think you would rely on Congress to make that decision.
And that would be, there could be a congressional declaration of war. He would not unilaterally send U.S. troops in, but if Congress declared war as commander-in-chief, he certainly would oversee it.
Do one more, Al.
What's the difference between non-interventionism and being isolationist? It almost sounds very close.
Yeah, and quite frankly, that ends up how it gets spun. And I've been called an isolationist a couple times, and it makes hairs on my back stand. But isolationist would be this idea that we should halt free trade. We should basically close our borders, and that's kind of like what FDR did with, I think it was the Smoot-Hartley Act, where he basically put up protectionist barriers, protect our U.S. industries, don't allow for more competition. Non-intervention, if you think about it, conceptually, it's the exact opposite. It's saying have free trade, have diplomacy, have peace, have honest friendship with all nations. The difference is we just don't have troops everywhere. And if you think troops are means of diplomacy and engaging with other nations, then I suppose you could call it isolationist, but he thinks that it's diplomacy, not militarism, that is the way to work with different countries.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot.